Our next speaker is Peter O'Keefe. Peter is the head of Monsanto in Australia and New Zealand and oversees the company's market-leading vegetable seed operation in addition to the cotton and canola biotech trade businesses. Peter has been involved in agriculture all his life, growing up on a broadacre farm in the Darling Downs region of southern Queensland. With an agricultural science degree, Peter became a research agronomist, taking on a role with Sardie on Eyre Peninsula before moving into the private sector as an agronomist with Roberts Limited in Tasmania. After 12 years in various management roles within the crop protection industry, Peter joined Monsanto. Please welcome Peter.
Okay, this is actually the first time that Monsanto's attended this event, and certainly won't be the last. We've done our best to make sure that we're aligned with industry, but what we've learned certainly over the last couple of days is, whilst we've done a pretty good job of being aligned, we need to work harder at forming partnerships right through the chain. So yeah, we've certainly enjoyed the experience, and I think, as you'll see from this presentation, yeah, there's a lot of relevant stuff in the seed industry that will feed right through the supply chain. So given I work for Monsanto, obviously this will be a Monsanto-centric view on life with seed breeding or seed and breeding. But this is really about where the seed industry is heading. So it's not just about Monsanto, it's about the seed side or the genetic side of the fruit and vegetable industry. And we're right at the cusp of what you'd call a step change with the genetic side or the breeding side. A whole lot of work has been coming together over the last 4 or 5 years that's just about to start to deliver some pretty amazing outputs, and following on from some of the comments that Dan just made as well. And so you think, well, where does genetics fit in this discussion? Well, one way that you could look at it is, if you look at all this fantastic produce out here, it can only be as good as its genetic potential. So you start with a genome, and that will have the potential set for life of that plant, with taste, for how it looks, how it stores, etc. And so you can't change that. That's the potential. That's as good as it can be. And then you work back from there, and depending how good the job is that everyone does through the supply chain, from growers right through the market agents, through the supermarkets, into the consumer's fridge, etc., that determines how much you work back from the genetic potential. So where seedcos, or where the genetic piece fits in this, is we have to set the bar as high as we possibly can, because that's the potential for all of these things, all of these characteristics that people have talked about time and time again over the last 2 days. Our mission, and like all mission, it's a pretty grand statement, but it's real and it's happening. We've always focused on grower productivity. That's the history of seed. Of course, that's the association makes perfect sense to be focused at grower level and productivity. So that won't change, and that will be important always. However, and further to my comments about why we're here, why we're at PMA, and what's changing, I guess, is increasing the consumption of fruit and vegetables. That's what we're certainly about, and globally, and down here in Australia and New Zealand. And doing that by innovation in seed and genetics. Just the Monsanto business, it's kind of new to vegetables, and we're still finding people today that will come up to our stand here and sort of say, well, where does Monsanto? I didn't know Monsanto was involved in vegetables. And that's because it's not a long history, and I'll go through the key dates that have happened for Monsanto in the vegetable seed industry later. But we're very much a seed business. So we've got our major platforms are corn, soybean and cotton globally, and vegetables now is the 4th pillar for Monsanto. And we're a research and development company, always have been, always will be. We churn a massive amount of our earnings back into research and development for future product development each year. And that product development is broken up into a few chunks. There's the conventional breeding that underpins everything we do, and then we'll have technologies that have enhanced that conventional breeding. So that's still conventional breeding, but very much enhanced platform for conventional breeding. And then there's the biotech piece, and within that genetic modification, which I'll talk about in a second. So $180 million a year we're currently reinvesting in the seeds business on vegetables alone. That's without even thinking about the row crops. And so that's a very big number, and a number that we're proud of, and we know it'll mean that we're going to generate some amazing things over the next decade. So what does that mean for vegetables? Well, yeah, we've learned an awful lot about breeding and technology from our experience in those huge global crops, so soybean, corn, and cotton in particular. Like, that has been a complete focus for the company over the last 20 years is breeding. So the exciting part, or the exciting future for vegetables is we're taking all that expertise, all our learnings, all our technology that have been applied and are still being developed in those big grain crops that feed the world to vegetables. And so you've superimposed what we know, what we've learnt, and what we've developed from those grain crops. You superimpose that over a large vegetable seed company, and you've got a recipe for success. Probably a good time just to touch on the GM thing, the biotech thing. It's obviously, as people get familiar with the fact that Monsanto is involved in vegetables, fruit and vegetables, inevitably the next question is about GM, and it's something that can send a shiver down people's spine within the fruit and vegetable industry. It certainly doesn't have that effect on me. So just to tell you where we're at with GM, well, the first thing is the possibilities for GM in fruit and vegetables are just endless. The technology works, we know that, and there's so much you could do in the fruit and vegetable industry. So that's the first key point. So what's going on globally with GM and veg? Well, we're just launching, as we speak, our first GM vegetable product in the US at the moment, which is a genetically modified sweet corn product. So that's what's going on globally. What's going on in Australia and New Zealand at the moment with GM and fruit and veg? The answer to that is absolutely nothing. We have no current plans for commercialising genetically modified fruit or vegetables in Australia. That could change as time goes on, but at the moment there's no work being done, and there's no plans for work being done. And that, just to sort of highlight that point, 95% of that $180 million that we spend on research at the moment is conventional breeding and enhanced conventional breeding. It's 5% or less than 5% globally is on GM. So just wanted to make that point that it's a great science and it has great applications, but at this point in time we're not there. And if you ask, if you want to know why not, there's a few reasons for that. One is consumer understanding, and I use that term understanding very deliberately. People often talk about consumer acceptance, but we actually see it as understanding or lack of understanding. So an information void about what GM can offer and how safe GM is. If you ask people or survey people in that environment for their thoughts on GM fruit and vegetables, they're most likely to say that they don't want it, or they're not sure. But so it's a lack of awareness more than a lack of acceptance. The other reasons that would constrain us from going forward, the spend required per crop is huge. So to actually take a product from a concept to a commercial product through the very, very intensive regulatory processes around the world, it takes about $10 million from start to finish with a trait in a crop. So you can think as you break down to smaller and smaller segments within the fruit and vegetable industry, it would take you a long time to peg that $10 million back. Other thing you've got to watch is export markets. If there's any chance that a genetically modified product could be traded overseas, you've got to be very careful that the markets that it could end up in also have acceptance for that product. Otherwise, it won't be able to be traded, and obviously that would not be a good thing for those involved in export. So that's just another barrier. So don't want to be too negative about it, but at the moment, that's the equation. Endless opportunities, but a lot of work to be done, and not in the foreseeable future. Okay, just Monsanto vegetables. Like the Monsanto brand itself, probably not that familiar to people, but I'm sure people, growers and anyone involved in the input side are familiar with the two brands that we've acquired over the last 5 years. So we've been historically, we are an ag company. In 2000, we made the decision to get out of anything outside of agriculture, so no distractions by pharmaceuticals, industrial chemicals, or any of these things. Very much an ag company. and very much a seed and trait company as well. We've got we do have a chemical component or a crop protection component. I'm sure there's nearly everyone in the room would be familiar with our Roundup brands, but and that's what we're known for in a lot of areas, but it's not actually our focus. Yes, we've got a Roundup business, but we are about seed and we are about trait. So yes, Seminis came into the Monsanto stable in 2005, very strong brand globally, 3,500 varieties in 150 countries, so really a big part of the landscape and a truly global company. So that was our first step, and a good step. If you're looking to get into vegetables, then why not start at the top? Followed in 2009 by the acquisition of the Dorada Seeds Group, which another very strong brand, excellent breeders, very more focused on the protected or indoor segment, but and therefore complementary to Seminis. So two big purchases or acquisitions and two very strong brands, which has been a challenge to integrate. You can imagine when you've got big companies, multinational companies operating all over the world, one US company, another Dutch, and you try and integrate systems, people, just approach, just outlook, missions. It can be tough. So that's been hard work, but we're certainly through that now and to the stage where we've just got a powerful vegetable seed organisation, leveraging the three brands of Monsanto, Seminis and Dorada. As I mentioned before, we're really on the edge of a step change in the whole, a bit of trouble moving here, on the whole breeding piece. A lot has been happening behind the scenes, but slowly coming to fruition now, but we're really on the edge of a lot more change, a lot more often in as far as varieties go. Dan mentioned markers before. This is, it sounds so simple, but being able to map the genome of plants and find pieces that you want, and just as importantly, pieces that you don't want within that genome, to be able to easily identify them and therefore select for them through your breeding is revolutionising breeding as we speak. And so it's about selecting what you want quicker. And one of the really frustrating parts about plant breeding over the last, well, always for the last forever, is sort of unwanted association. So something you want with something you don't want. And there's a couple of examples that spring to mind for Australia would be Fusarium race 3 resistance in tomatoes, very closely linked to a gene or side by side on the genome for traits that actually give you soft fruit. So your breeders are working hard to select for that disease tolerance, and at the same time, accidentally or inadvertently, breeding for soft fruit, which we don't want. So that's the kind of thing that markers can do. Another example would be watermelons, that there's, again, sitting side by side on the genome is firm fruit and a lack of sweetness. So you select for one and you miss out on the other. But what markers is meaning, and where Monsanto is definitely at the moment, is breaking those unwanted associations, and so you can have sweet, firm fruit for watermelon. Seed companies are often accused of narrowing down the focus or narrowing down the base, genetic base in their breeding programs, and we are very aware of the need not to do that, to always have access to a broad germplasm base, and that's just a slide just showing that we have sort of over 20 sources of tomato germplasm from around the world that we can pull bits and pieces from as required. You heard Maggie talk about heritage or heirloom tomatoes before. Well, they're on that slide. Just because something's heritage or heirloom doesn't mean that a piece of that, the attractive piece of that can't end up in a modern day commercial product. Dan again mentioned before just that what is happening with breeding, and it's two things that are changing the game is the probability of success, so with these markers and these other technologies, and the speed at which we can punch through the generations these days. So it used to be almost a game of chance. Massive populations, you can only process so many, you can only have so many plants in each, or plots or plants in each trial. So you just couldn't possibly look at everything. So you just had to have your best guess and work your way back, down from there. And better than a game of chance, but not much better than a game of chance, really. Obviously, breeder skill comes into play, but with